What is up, my dudes? It is Alec Lindstrom, former Boston College offensive lineman. You're listening to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. Go Eagles and go ACC.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name's Joey Weaver, continuing our team preview series looking ahead to the 2025 season. It's a special one tonight. It's my Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. We talked to our friend, longtime guest of the show, Kelly Quinlan, publisher, JacketsOnline.com, newly of the On3 network now after a whole transition this summer. Kelly, welcome back. How you been?
Been busy, man. It's been quite a roller coaster of the last 3 months, I guess, going back to June.
Yeah.
So end of May, June, transitioning sites, the AD thing that came out of the blue, and then get into summer camp season, OV season, and then rolling right into camp. So it's been not relaxing.
I was going to say, it was, I believe, that the day of, I think it was before the final baseball game of the year, when you figure that the athletic calendar is really coming to a close, that the athletic director change was announced. And at that point, here we go again. So, bit of a tumultuous summer. Hopefully you're ready to go for the football season, though, to just kind of settle back into a routine of sorts.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a quiet week coming up, so that'll be nice to kind of catch a breath after camp and then get into game week. And then next thing you know, we'll all be out in Colorado covering that game. So it'll be here before you know it. And then the thing I always joke about is the season goes by in like 5 seconds. It feels like it's 3 weeks long if you're a college football fan in a lot of ways, until you get at least to the postseason aspect of it. And it kind of drags a little more. But the first month of the season goes by like in a flash, and then you look up and then you're get into league play with everybody, and you're like, what happened? So I'm and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way, but it just feels like that's how it is every year. It's this like long kind of dirge, and then you get to the season, and then it goes by like it's like a roller coaster. It just goes, you're 2 minutes on and you're done.
I always try to remind myself to savor it while it's there, and I've got a game I can watch on a Thursday night or a Tuesday night or whatever. Because, sure enough, you're
action.
Yep. It's like eventually you're going to get to January, and well, now what do I watch? Seinfeld reruns, or what is it? So, not that there's anything wrong with that, but anyways,
nice pull.
Yeah. We're here to talk about the 2025 season for Georgia Tech. It is year 3 under Brent Key, at least the third full year, obviously after the interim run that he had. Looking back on it, Kelly, the process to hiring Brent Key was not the most smooth thing. I mean, really, there was the whole Willie Fritz thing that went on and was about to happen, and then it didn't happen, and it felt a little bit like they settled for Brent Key. It was a little bit of a discount hire almost from a monetary standpoint, and yet I kind of feel like in a lot of ways this has gone almost as well as you ever could have asked for a guy who had no previous head coaching experience, and with the the track record that he brought in. I mean, this has gone really pretty well, and I won't speak for the whole fan base, but I'd like to think that most fans are pretty happy with where this program is at, considering where it was when Brent Key took it over.
Yeah, I think that, you look at what transpired. Ultimately, I think that there was a push from Jay Batt to hire Willie Fritz. That was his guy. He wanted to put his stamp on things. I think, looking back in retrospect, it probably cost Josh Pastner his job a couple months later when, Josh's personality being what it was, and then Bat not really getting to maybe put his stamp on things. And it was sort of, Brent did everything he could to get the job, and no one was expecting them to turn it around and be in bowl contention after the way things started that season and Jeff getting fired. And he has just handled things and had a plan. The one thing, talking to Brent, and I know Brent really well now, he had a plan for this, and it wasn't that he was trying to sabotage Jeff Collins or whatever. He had a plan for whenever he was going to be a head coach, and it looked like it was going to happen at UCF with O'Leary, and then that thing all went sideways in 1 year there, and him and O'Leary were out, and Scott Frost, I think. Oh no, yeah, it was Scott Frost they hired, and he kind of turned around. They had basically one bad season. They went from a 9-win team to basically whatever they were that the last year he was there. But it had been set up for him to kind of maybe take over that program eventually from O'Leary, and then so he had been planning this all along. Like he's a tech guy. He has a lot of plans. He has a lot of plans for his backup plans for his plans, right? Redundancies.
One of those
All
guys with
through
like
his
13 NCAA tournament brackets. Like,
yeah. So he knew what he wanted to do. He had an idea. There were a lot of things that kind of had to play out. I think one of them you saw right from the jump was that they had to keep Andrew Thacker, the DC at the time. He helped him get the job. The way the defense played during the stretches after he took over as interim coach was a huge factor. The offense was really struggling at times, and especially after Jeff Sims got hurt that year. And I think there were some things there. He made some decisions, that he probably regrets in hindsight, but it allowed him to make his moves. And then you get in a situation where Santucci goes to the NFL this year after 1 year, where he was coached very well in the second half of the season once he kind of got a feel for his defense. And now they're on to Blake Gideon. But if you look at the big picture of everything, I think Brent's been kind of following his game plan. The biggest thing that I will say, the difference between this team and last year is last year they got exposed due to a lack of depth. Cost them amongst every other factor of 1,000 that somehow fell Georgia's way in that game. The depth thing was the biggest thing that was a controllable that went sideways, and so he felt good about most of his players. They addressed the needs they had: defensive line, some secondary pieces, wide receiver. But they also went out and got depth at every position across the board, really, other than punter. Um, they are deeper than they were a year ago. Punter situation, you have a walk-on backup punter, but like other than that, like you look across the board and it's significant what they've done. Even they went and signed a pretty good high school kicker. Like it's been interesting to see like how he's tried to build out depth, and it's the most depth I've seen at Georgia Tech since probably O'Leary in terms of just Chan never had that. Chan was dealing with lighter scholarships his whole time. Paul Johnson had a mass, basically departure, of people and the depth, and then some issues with just kind of misfits with what he was trying to do, and they never kind of got their footing to where they were really deep most of the time. And Jeff Collins, same thing. Like he was star chasing too much and took risks and signing guys and taking damaged 5-star guys and stuff like that weren't maybe ready to contribute or didn't love playing college football or whatever. And that was the thinness that Key walked into. So he's trying to fix all of that. And it's been interesting to see his roster management and kind of talk to him behind the scenes as well a little bit about some of the theories behind what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. And I will say this, and I told Brett this, I said, his ability to use the portal and what they've done with it, he has sped up the turnaround here and probably bought himself a lot more time than he would have had they had to start at square one rebuilding this team. You wouldn't have Haynes King. You wouldn't have, some of the other guys they've added in the depth. Warren Burrell started last year at corner. Or maybe you don't have some of these other guys. Maybe you would have still had an Amari Harvey, maybe, but like you wouldn't have some of these other cats they brought in that have made such a huge difference. And if you look at the team this year, there's going to be multiple guys that start games that began their career somewhere else in college, or like in Akilo Stone's case, a defensive tackle, started at Georgia Tech, went to an SEC school, played for 2 years, and came back to finish up at Georgia Tech. So I think there's a lot of planning and a lot of attention that goes into the way he constructs his roster. And I think that's one of the things that you benefit from having a head coach that's not a coordinator, he's not worried about his offense, his defense, or some special teams guru or whatever. He's looking at the broader picture, and yes, he loves O-line, and that gets maybe a little bit of special attention and maybe a little more love. But he's looking at his roster from top to bottom. I got this many slots, and how am I going to fill it with the best players possible? And if they have a good year and they win 10 games or something, it'll be because of the way they did that and the way he constructed his coaching staff too, using the same philosophy. I have these spaces. I have these deficiencies in my coaching or my coaching staff. Let me go, now they have two special teams coaches, two guys that have really good backgrounds in it, because that was a problem last year for them. They went out and got a young cornerbacks coach and hired a DCU's a safeties coach to work with Corey Peoples, to surround him with more help, to help him develop more as a coach, which he's been doing, but also to really strengthen an area of weakness in coaching and player development in the secondary. All those things point to, this is a guy that really understands what he's doing. And I think that bodes well, and there are still guys that are going to I think Jeff Brom's a really good coach. He's going to coach his boys up at Louisville. There's some guys doing really good things. SMU really took advantage of what they're doing. And then there's other questions in the league. Like you look at North Carolina or some of these other programs that have maybe easy schedules, but haven't been able to consistently win or have new coaches. The opportunity's there for Georgia Tech to do something this year and be in the hunt. And so that's going to be the expectation. And that's the biggest difference between where this program was when Jeff Collins got fired after not going to a bowl game for several years, and where it is in going into year 3 of Brent Key.
I always swore up and down that 2019 team did not have to be as bad as it was. Like if they had
Paul
really
Johnson
made an
asked
effort,
me if he thought he was tanking,
yeah,
for draft picks. He goes,
yeah.
"Are they tanking, Kelly?" I already called me after the first game. He's like, "Does Jeff Collins think that they get draft picks if they're just bad? Out of that, is it like a thing where they're gonna tell recruits that, hey, look at all this playing time because we're so bad?" It just was bad coaching. A bad fit. They hired a bad OC. So Dave Patino's not a bad OC. I like Dave personally. He was a bad fit for what they were doing and in the league. He was, I think, over his head in a P5 at that time, coordinator job. And I think that it was, watching someone take, the little kids with the little blocks pieces, and they were just trying to stick the square in the circle the whole time. Dropping back 50 times a game, with running quarterbacks, and you didn't have to do all that. There's everyone you've watched in college football that's any good kind of tailors what they're doing. Either they have a system like Paul did, or they tailor what they're doing to the skills that they have. He did neither of those things, right? Buster was an air raid guy. He has tailored his thing to Haynes King's. And if you watch the game when Aaron Philo comes in, it looks very different because they have different skill sets, because he's tailoring his offense to the guy playing quarterback. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It looked incompetent, and it made the coaches look incompetent. And I don't think that was the case. I think you had a issue with your offensive coordinator, and I think you had bad leadership at the top with Jeff.
You mentioned the quarterback situation. Let's go there and talk about it, because Haynes King is the name that's going to get a lot of run nationally. And I saw some stuff from CBS Sports recently that he came back and had some really good numbers in terms of avoiding losing a bunch of yards on sacks and avoiding turnovers and some things like this. Haynes King is the guy that's getting a lot of run, but coming off of last year, the thing that really made me feel good about this fall and this season was the fact that there's both Haynes King and Aaron Philo, and what we had seen from him as a true freshman last year. Haynes King, obviously a guy with, for better or worse, a history of injuries at times. And so you kind of have a feeling of it's going to be, it'll be surprising if he gets through a full season without missing a little bit of time. So having a second option there and a little bit of a different skill set is something that's really comforting, I think, as you look to the season. You talk about building depth and when it's in the quarterback room, and that's as big as anywhere. So I guess I was surprised, Kelly. I'm curious to get your take. How did they keep Aaron Philo on this roster with what he showed? He seemed like a guy who would have really gotten a lot of attention as a potential transfer candidate. Probably could have had a chance to start in a number of places, and yet they got him back to sit. I would assume he will sit a majority of the time behind Haynes King, and yet he is still on the flats there to do that, and hopefully, presumably, take over the offense full time once King is gone.
Yeah, I think it all started with Haynes King. He got approached. People were trying to get him to come to their schools. Obviously, there were some pretty high profile openings. Even look at like situations like Tennessee. They kind of knew what was going on with Nico before it happened. There were lots of various dominoes that could have impacted the quarterback situation at Georgia Tech. Haynes deciding to stay was one domino, and they got that squared away. And the second domino was Philo. And Philo always seemed like he was going to stay from talking to people who know Aaron really well. Like, it was just about him being comfortable with the plan and what they're going to do and the future. And, and obviously, taking care of people financially is a piece of this too. And he felt comfortable with what Georgia Tech wanted to do with him, what the plan was financially and athletically as well as academically. And so it was the easier decision for him to stay. And not roll the dice. And there's so much data now on guys that have just completely screwed themselves up. I saw a very funny Instagram or Twitter or something about. Do you remember Tate Martell?
Oh yeah,
Who was like the
Tathan.
quarterback at Ohio State? Yeah,
Tathan. Yep.
like how badly that guy screwed his life up and like career by just making a series of terrible decisions with what to do with his like career, and he ended up like the fourth string quarterback at UNLV or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of data now on this that these guys can point to, even guys he played with. The one that's been successful of the transfer quarterbacks from Georgia Tech and this portal era who was ironically a guy that Jeff Collins recruited, which was Tucker Gleason, who went to Toledo and sat at Toledo, sat for like 2 years behind a starter, learned his craft, and then took over the job and became a really good quarterback. But like, it took him, he's using like a COVID year and stuff to like get to where he needed to go to.
So he was in the
There's a
same
lot
recruiting
of,
class as Jeff Sims, I think.
yeah. So Tucker was the guy, and I heard about him all that summer. Like, he's going to be our guy. He's going to be our guy. Then they were able to get Jeff Sims, and then Jeff was so gifted and so good when he knew he wasn't going to be hit in practice that he just blew Tucker out of the water, and then they just kind of gave up on him. And Tucker was like, all right, screw this, I'm leaving. And then you ended up in the weird situation they were in where you had like Zach Gibson and having to play like a true freshman, Zach Pyron, in the interim phase for Key. Like, all of that was a domino from the Jeff Sims and how Jeff Collins handled Jeff Sims. And so, and Jeff Sims he's on, I think he's done now. Is he done? I don't know.
I don't know
He's
if
on his
anyone's done these
third
days.
school. I don't remember if he has eligibility left or not. I've not actually looked at that. Jeff's a great kid, by the way, and he is just not like geared to be the guy in a offense that requires a quarterback to be the guy, to take hits, to be the. He is much better playing a supporting role. He has got sort of the wiring of a wide receiver. That was what I would say about Jeff Sims. That's It's fine if you're playing for Mike Leach and he can maximize you in an air raid. Rest in peace, coach. But like, the trying to be the guy at Georgia Tech was not going to work, and it didn't. It certainly didn't work at Nebraska either under a bigger microscope.
Mm-hmm.
They figured that thing out real fast. So yeah, getting back to Philo, it was, yeah. And then the thing people don't realize is like Graham Knowles would have started over like several of the guys that started for Jeff Collins. Like, he's pretty good. Like, he's a good player. Like, he's further along than a lot of people realize. And that dude's sticking around too. And then they brought in Grady Adamson, and he's been great as a true freshman. He's going to redshirt, but like, he's pushed those guys too. They have a really great culture in that quarterback room, and I think Chris Winkie gets a lot of credit for it, and obviously Buster. And those guys coaching them up and Coach Key keeping them happy, which is, it's like having, 4 point guards on your team. You got one basketball, you're trying to keep them all happy, right? And he's figured out a way to make it work. And so, there's a lot of credit that goes to him for that. Working to voodoo on that.
It feels like it's a big deal that you've got that safety blanket where there's so many teams where it's like, oh, they can probably win 9 games, but if the quarterback gets hurt early,
Look at
maybe they
Florida
only win
State.
4.
Remember what happened 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Like Mike Norvell didn't have a plan B.
Yeah.
He had a guy Tate Rodemaker, they flipped from USF, who I thought was kind of a fringe guy for USF to take. He was okay. Like he was a developmental guy there, and you're playing him in the playoffs, or theoretically you were going to play him in the playoffs. Like that's, that is the prime example. And it's what every coach I know uses now to illustrate that point. Like it just, you get in your backup quarterback, your whole season goes sideways. That happened USF, another school I like spent some time covering. Like they lost Byron Brown early last year, and like the backup quarterback was not great. They managed to still win some games with him, but it was a far cry from what they would have done with. So they went out and got a different backup quarterback, like out of the portal this summer, and knew their offense. Like, so you look at all those things, you've got to like have, and they, that they're a great example. They have a young freshman quarterback who could play this year if they really need him to, but now they can redshirt him. Like, that's what you got to do, man. You got to be thinking multiple moves ahead. Georgia, look at them last year with Gunner, like, and how different he was, and then not adapting well to having to play him because, let's be honest, they had poor running back play. So like, you can't have that dude and not have a solid running game around him, and it all went sideways for them too. Like, and it'll be interesting to see how they look this year. There's a lot of this stuff going on, man. It's wild, and seeing the way people value different positions and stuff in the portal or with their NIL money or now rev share or whatever they're going to do. It's such a different and interesting philosophy that each coach has, and it's totally different. From talking to people, like I got buddies on staffs all across the country, from Ohio State, Texas, or whatever, down to like USF or like App State or whatever. So like I know people at all these different places, and just hearing the stories of how they all handle it, it's fascinating.
Everyone's very much trying to build the plane while they fly it in this case. Let's talk about, and I guess it's the transfer portal, but it's also to some degree freshmen coming in. I've told people on numerous previews here that we've done this offseason, Kelly, that I'm at the point I can't keep up with all the guys that are coming and going from even my own team, much less anyone else's teams. So any help here you can offer me on, key guys that are coming and going would be very much appreciated. I will tee you up with, I know that the big one that I keep hearing about, in national media talking about it and all that was Eric Singleton, obviously, freshman All-American a couple of years ago, wide receiver. He was like depending on where you look, he was like a top 5 overall transfer in the portal this year. Arguably the top receiver in the portal. And I couldn't help but think, seeing that, I was like, I mean, he's a great athlete. He's fast. Like, he can play anywhere, but like, he's just not a complete receiver to me. I feel like the national media made that out to be a little bit bigger of a loss than necessarily it will be for Georgia Tech.
So he was featured, like they made a point to feature him in the offense at Georgia Tech. And I think some of it was to keep him happy and I think at times they fed him the football probably more than they should have. He didn't read blocking well. Hands were very average, had a lot of drops, or struggles in contested catches. Eric's a great dude, Eric Singleton. Really like him. He is still really early in his development as a receiver in terms of being a refined product, right? And so they went out and replaced him with 2 guys from FIU, Eric Rivers, who was an actual All-American last year, and Dean Patterson, who's a bigger bodied outside receiver, to give them one they haven't had really since Jalen Camp, but he's a better player than Jalen Camp was. No offense to Jalen. but you know, a bigger X receiver that can go out and make plays one-on-one, beat coverages, get deep balls. And they brought back Malik, so they have a stocked room in the starting three. What's different now is you have they're 6, 7 deep at receiver, which they haven't been. So that's a totally different thing. And some of that's through the portal, but the reality is the depth there is all guys that are homegrown. They signed Isaiah Caney, Brent Key signed. Zion Taylor was a transition kid that they brought in from high school. Bailey Stockton, they brought him in as a walk-on, converted him into a scholarship player. Those three guys would have started at Georgia Tech at receiver the last since maybe 2016 at any point, and they're all could come off the bench. Canyon might start over Dean Patterson. Like he's had a really good camp. Jordan Allen's a true freshman they brought in who's ridiculous. DeBron Gatling, a kid they brought in from South Carolina, is starting to figure it out. Who's just a redshirt freshman. They got depth, and yeah, losing Eric was the optics of it were worse than probably the reality of it. I know maybe Eric turns it on and like he figures it out and it's great, but this wasn't like losing Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs going to Alabama cost you 2 wins probably. Like losing Eric Singleton, I don't know that it impacts you other than maybe it's a plus if you got these two other guys probably for what you were going to pay Eric Singleton or you might have got those two guys in a kilo stone on defensive tackle or something else. Like he commanded a big number line based on potential, but we haven't seen enough of it yet to make it make sense to me. Like it wasn't like Haynes King who had this great season last year, even without being able to throw the football as well as he could, or like even the consistency of a Malik Rutherford when he was healthy, or Jamal Haynes, running back, right? He didn't have any of those things, and maybe he's going to be great there, but I just don't see it. It reminds me a lot of go if you follow Georgia Tech basketball, Miles Kelly, right?
Mm.
Who went to Auburn as well. Miles Kelly was a very good piece of a Georgia Tech basketball team. He was a piece. He was like the fifth, sixth option at Auburn, and obviously had a nice run there and got to win some games and do some things he couldn't do at Georgia Tech, and has taken advantage of it. But he was not going to turn himself into an NBA prospect. Now Eric in his defense has a lot more time left on there, and is a lot more in terms of measurables and things that the NFL draft will covet. But he's still also 5'11", right? Like, and doesn't have A+ hands, and so that gets interesting because there's a ton of guys who run fast that are under 6 foot. That's not the world's most marketable statistic. So it'll be interesting. I'm rooting for Eric Singleton, but to me, I think that Georgia Tech won on that. I think they could have got hamstrung having to pay Eric Singleton more than probably what his value was to their roster. Auburn was desperate. They're trying to save Hugh Freeze, so they have to pay him whatever his buyout, however many tens of millions of dollars his buyout is. They're trying to get out of that. So it made sense for them to go crazy spending in free agency to avoid that.
Any real key additions or departures that you saw either on the offensive line or on the defensive side of the ball?
I'd say the biggest addition was a kid named Malachi Carney in terms of offensive side of the ball.
Is that literally the
Big
biggest
right tackle.
addition, or?
Yeah, he's like 6'4", 350. Like he is a giant human. He's the largest player I've seen. Him, Jordan Floyd are like the two guys you get off the bus. You're like, whoa. Jordan Floyd's just a redshirt freshman, but Malachi Carney's a giant of a human. His legs, like his thighs, are the size of Malik Rutherford's waist. Like they're just ridiculous. I really like him. He's a people mover. Brought him in from South Alabama. Still needs to clean up some technique, but he played a lot of football for them. He slides in. Should be the starting right tackle. They brought in Will Reed from Princeton to be kind of a backup swing tackle guard guy, veteran guy who could start in a pinch. Obviously, every year they've been here, they've had to start multiple different offensive tackles. So I think that makes sense there from a depth perspective. The other probably big one on the offensive side was JT Byrne, the tight end they brought in from Cal, who started his career at Oregon State. Great blocking tight end. Will step right into what Jackson Hawes was doing in terms of being physical, attacking the football as a blocker, but, give you that big physical piece in the run game. We talked about Rivers and Patterson. Sorry. I'm looking, I got my cheat sheet up, so I try to, because I'll forget somebody if I don't do it this way. On the defensive side, that's changed a lot. The biggest guys they brought in, Stone, who I've talked about, came back from Ole Miss, started his career at Georgia Tech. Braden Manley, a kid they brought in from Mercer to be a defensive end. He's a really dynamic pass rusher. He can play both defensive end positions, which gives him a lot of flexibility. AJ Hoffler's a kid they brought in from Clemson, more of a stand-up outside edge guy, real twitchy. He missed the spring with a hamstring, has started to really come on finally. And then two linebackers I really like, Melvin Jordan, who they brought from Oregon State, and Kamen Spalding, who came from Tennessee Tech. Kamen Spalding's funny because he was like 195 or something. He was about the size of like a safety at Tennessee Tech. He's like 225 now, maybe. Like he just looks jacked and still runs and moves just as well as he did at 195. Jai Gilmore, nickelback they brought in from Georgia State, can play safety too. He's been really good. Savion Riley is an interesting one. He started at Vanderbilt, I think, as a freshman. He went to Colorado, didn't work out there. He was behind Deion's kid, which was not the best place to be on a depth chart. If you're playing football behind a coach's kid, regardless if it's Deion or anyone else. Came back to Georgia Tech. He's had a great camp. He looks like an NFL safety. He's the most impressive safety body I've seen in a while at Georgia Tech, just in terms of the physical specimen piece of it. Like, he looks like Morgan Burnett or like one of those dudes did. Like, Isaiah Johnson's another one that like popped into my head that had like those NFL measurables, looks apart. And then the other ones are kind of like some interesting like corner pieces, like Daquan White, who could start at corner. Kelvin Hill, who could start at nickel. Him and Jai Gilmore kind of fighting it out right now. Those are all sort of the guys. Matthew Alexander, D tackle, they brought in from UCF. He's your third D tackle behind JJ Vandenberg and Stone. And then Ronald Triplett's a defensive end that can play both end spots too. He's like a classic like lunch pail dude. Just will go out and do his job, not flashy, doesn't look like crazy, anything special, but he's really effective at what he does. So I think they've got some decent options.
The only other departure I'd looked at that I almost felt like was a little bit similar in a way to Eric Singleton was Romello Height, the defensive end going to Texas Tech. A guy that, again, got some praise from the national media, like, oh, Texas Tech paid a bunch of money for him, like all this stuff. But I just felt like coming into the year last
game against Miami.
Yeah, I was going to say, he got the strip sack on Cam Ward to seal that one. But, there were only a few moments last year where he really made a huge impact, it felt like. I felt like coming into the year, the expectations were a lot higher than the actual payoff was in a lot of cases. But as you mentioned, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, he kind of mirrored Kyle Kennard, who the year before, he had like this great game against Wake Forest, and then kind of didn't do a lot. Then he hit the portal, went to South Carolina, and did really well. That, I think, is what Romello's hoping will happen. He just hasn't been. He's the same kind of thing where he couldn't finish like sacks and things off. So I'm curious to see if that actually happens at Texas Tech or not. And obviously, anyone that's followed college football has read about what's going on there. So it's very clear what was the sort of driving factor. By the way, some kid making like what you or I make in a couple of years, making it 1 year at college at that age it's hard to give everyone a hard time about that. Like, dude, take the money. Like,
yeah. I don't blame these guys for a second. Like, just to be clear, if I'm mad at anything, it's the system that sets it up so that, my favorite players can leave my favorite team so easily, but I don't blame them for doing it. Like, do what's best for you, obviously.
No, yeah, it's always, you got to look out for number one, look out for your family and then yourself. And like, everything else is, there's a priority list. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think that you got to be flexible, but it has made loving the sport harder. Like the relationships we have with players is different. With the coaches' relationships with the players is different. A lot of it's become very transactional at some places. That's one thing I do give Brent Key some credit for. He has made it less or feel less like that than some other places I've been around.
Yep.
And since the portal started, and maybe that's going to be some of the secret sauce for him. But yeah, some places it feels like you're watching like minor league football. Um, Only like more cutthroat than that because those guys are usually not getting cut in the season and stuff. It's like I don't know. It's almost like NFL training camp or something. You're waiting for like Hard Knocks to like show up and start. Hey buddy, you got to pack your stuff. You're out of here,
Yeah. Well, and
or I'm
man,
signing a free agent deal.
at Texas Tech, I mean, they're going to be under a microscope this year with, again, how many waves they've made in the portal this offseason and the name they've made for themselves there. So I hope it goes well for them. I have nothing against them, but, I get it. I wanted to ask you, Kelly, talking about the offense, and this is year 3, not only for Brent Key, but also for Buster Faulkner. We've talked about the quarterback room. You mentioned Jamal Haynes. You mentioned the wide receiver core and kind of how much is built out there. Buster Faulkner in particular, I know has gotten a lot of run this summer and some of the creative, impressive things that he does on offense. I'm always blown away in particular, like the number of different blocking schemes that they're able to run and run like cleanly is amazing to me. If you look at the offense and what you expect from it this year, is there an area? I know that we talked about kind of a couple of offensive line spots turning over, the tight end spots turning over. Is that kind of where you would look if you're looking for a reason that they wouldn't be one of the best offenses in the ACC and one of the better ones in the country? Or we'll be right back to the episode, but wanted to give you guys just a quick reminder about section103.com. It is the internet's premier place for all things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They have t-shirts, they got sweatshirts, they got hoodies, they've got things for men, women, children, babies, something for the whole family. Find it all at section103.com. Use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. I love mine. I've been a customer for years. They have been so good to us. They've got such great looking things using the official word marks, all the official colors. It's can be tough to find Georgia Tech gear sometimes, but not when you go to section103.com. Everything looks great, super high quality. We've really enjoyed it. It's very comfortable. It holds up to the test of time. I wear mine all the time. I love mine. You will love yours. Section103.com. Once again, use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. Make sure you follow them on social media. They've always got different deals going on, promos that come out, especially when Georgia Tech has a big win, one of the teams. So make sure you keep up with everything going on at section103.com. They've got NIL shirts, lots of vintage apparel, all things for your Georgia Tech fandom. One last time, that is at section103.com. Use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. Shout out to Steven and the gang, as always, for being huge supporters of the Basketball Conference podcast. We really appreciate it. You guys go show him some support, section103.com. And now let's get back to the show.
I would say the area of concern, the one you might have might be running back, just the depth there. Chad Alexander, who's was the number 2 last year, is out for the first part of the season with an injury. You have Trelane Maddox, who played but has had 2 pretty serious injuries in the last year, one before Georgia Tech and one while he was there. And then Malachi Housley, the kid they brought in from Penn, I think he was the Ivy League Player of the Year. A lot of uncertainty there. They got some young talent, JP Powell, Shane Marshall. I think that's sort of one of the few areas of concern. Just Jamal staying healthy, taking some of those reps off of him. Offensive line depth gets a little fuzzier as you get further out of the starters. You got a lot of younger guys there or guys who haven't played as much in games. You have an older guy like Benjamin Galloway who hasn't played a ton but has been on the team for 3 years. Or you could have Josh Petty or Peyton Joseph play. There's a little bit. I'm curious what the back end of like that top 8-9 offensive line looks at. I feel like if you're looking at Georgia Tech though, otherwise like they're pretty solid. Tight end could be a little thin if they get banged up there again this year, which last year they were down to having to flip and play Harrison Moore from offensive line to tight end in some games, or play H-back. I wonder about that there. You got, three seniors, and then Luke Harpering, who played a little bit last year, and then no one that's played like a meaningful snap in a game. So that fall off is pretty steep after you get out of that first group.
Well, it figures to be, again, I think we're trying to come up with reasons that it could be a question, but
if you're like really like, if what am I worrying about if I'm Brent Key at night? Like, that's probably what I'm thinking about in terms of the offensive side of things.
yeah. So getting into kind of depth issues.
Yeah, it's mostly depth. It's not, I don't feel comfortable with starting this person. Like, I don't think they're there. They have two centers they like. They have enough guys to play guard. Like, tackle, they have a lot of options. And three of them have played a ton of football. So I think they're in good shape. It's just more of what happens if this happens, then this happens kind of thing.
Well, for 3 straight years of Buster Faulkner, it's kind of the opposite on the other side of the ball. Is we'll have a third defensive coordinator in 3 different years. As mentioned, you started with
Thacker.
Andrew Thacker had the first name for whatever reason. The second name
actually it's been 4 because remember Thacker got demoted. And they had an interim DC with Kevin Shearer. And then,
that's a name I hadn't thought about in a while.
And Kevin and they all got. Kevin, I guess, was given the opportunity to stick around as an analyst or something, but he left.
Mm-hmm.
Did he go to Georgia State? Maybe
he might have. Yeah,
I feel like he was like the DC at Georgia State last year. I should know this. Thacker's at UGA now. I do know that because I ran into him at the UGA game, and I actually broke that story for the UGA side, which is a long story. But I ran into him last year at the UGA game. He walked by where I was visiting a friend and gave me a big hug. Was happy to see me, and it was, he appreciated that I was always fair to him. He understood what was going. He understood. These guys all do, man. Lord knows I've covered a lot of defensive coordinators now at Georgia Tech. I started covering Georgia Tech in 2009, and we're on what? If you count interims.
Say goodness, we could play a real game here of name that coordinator for. It's been a lot of them.
Dave Womack was the first one.
Yeah,
he was Paul's first DC. He got fired after the Orange Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
He brought in Al Groh, which was a terrible hire.
Yep.
Al Groh gets fired in the middle of the season 2.5 years later.
Yep.
Charles Kelly took over as interim DC.
Yep.
They hired Ted Roof.
Yep.
Then fired Ted eventually and hired Nate Woody.
Yep.
Woody was his last DC. Then you had Thacker and Collins. Then you had Kevin Shearer. You've had Tyler Santucci and Blake Gideon. So that's, 9 defensive coordinators in 16 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not super. Not super. It sort of impacts. It sort of is articulate of the crappy defense I've seen played on the flats. Time covering the team. So far cry from Tenuta, and what I was used to seeing early on in my career as a journalist covering on the other side of things.
Well, I was going to say the run that you just went through goes back to like when I started in college. So this is kind of all I've ever known is this level of defense. But like
mediocre to average. Average was like awesome. They would win like 2014. They were sort of average. They weren't even that good. They were just sort of average.
They just got a lot of turnovers. Yeah.
Other than that, obviously the end of 22 with Brent, they were pretty good on defense the end of that season. 2009, they were actually pretty good in some games in 09. 08, they were very good the year before I started covering them. But it's been rough sledding.
I was going to say, if I'm Blake Gideon, the only thing that makes me nervous is having to follow up probably the best one of those of the last several years.
The only other one the gold standard.
Yeah, in 1 year. And the only other one that might hold a candle to him is Charles Kelly, who was only there for like 6 games or something as the intern.
And they Paul Johnson literally drew up the blitzes they were going to run and stuff with Charles. Paul he let the story was like, was Brian Cook or Bohan, whoever the quarterbacks coach was there, like do some of the offense, and he like stepped in. Probably was Bohannon. He stepped in and was like helping coach the defense,
Mm,
and like and Charles was trying to do the best he could as an interim guy, and they wanted to completely blow up everything Al Groh did because they were running a 3-4, and yeah, there's a lot of great stories that can't even tell like online from what happened. I was in the thick of all of hearing about all of it because it was very close to Dan Radakovich, who at the time, and then Paul obviously had a great relationship with, and so I got to hear a lot about what was going on. And then Charles Kelly was a really good friend of mine, so that was tough too when he didn't get the job and he hired Ted. And I was like, man, Ted was just at Auburn where they won, and like their defense wasn't very good, and he had all these NFL guys. I was like, what are you doing?
yeah.
It's like you have like it was like Paul Johnson's ability to pick DCs was like the equivalent of like your buddy that just picks like psycho women or something. Like, like just create, or like psycho man, whatever you want to, everyone of someone that's like has there you every one of us has like a friend that just has terrible taste in their significant other, and like picks the craziest possible person. That
Hmm.
like the worst possible match for what they were trying to do. That was Paul Johnson picking defensive coordinators during his tenure.
Well, and I know from following you from all this time, there's also an element where he was playing with one hand tied behind his back from a resourcing
Yeah, they had
standpoint.
no
And that's a,
money. So
you know,
like here's your budget hire. He got extra money to hire Ted Roof. That was like because there were some alums that were like happy to kick in to make that work so they could move money around in the budget to hire Ted. So they paid like for some other stuff or whatever, however that worked.
there was
But
a letter
like
jacket in his closet that they really liked.
so there's that poster that Jeff Collins claimed to have of Ted Roof in the Black Watch or whatever in his bedroom that probably never existed.
Oh, what a character. Where were we? Blake Gideon comes in from Texas. This is so a lot of the way that I am looking at this hire, Kelly, is I feel like between hiring Buster Faulkner and hiring Tyler Santucci, both of those were cases where Brent Key went out and hired somebody who was a little bit, under the radar, someone that people didn't really know their name, didn't know a whole lot about. And in both cases, it's worked out pretty well. And I feel like at this point, he has earned the benefit of the doubt in terms of this hire. And from what I've heard a little bit, again, from national folks, is there's some positive chatter about this hire. Like this is a sharp hire for him. But again, a guy who has never been a defensive coordinator, has never called plays. Is there anything clearly different that you expect about the defense this year versus last year between Santucci and Gideon? Or is it kind of more just trying to build on whatever Santucci had started out last year?
So essentially, what Brent did is they kept sort of what the defensive line was doing. So what Jeff Simpson and Kyle Pope, the run defensive coordinator, or whatever you want to call, I think Jeff Simpson has one of those titles. I don't know what it is, but I feel like he has one of. Anyways, Brent wanted him to keep doing what they were doing. He liked the run defense and wanted to improve some of the pass rushing stuff, but he was very comfortable. So they kind of melded that into what Gideon wanted to do. The coverages are going to be very different. What they're asking the secondary to do is very different. Um, it's about having different looks, um, but it essentially comes down to understanding what the quarterback's trying to do and what the personnel picture you're getting is, and that's what the defense is predicated on. Instead of this is our call and this is what we're doing. We're playing man or we're playing zone or three deep or whatever. Like they have very specific rules for how they attack things, and being more attacking, having more effective pass rushing. The big thing they talked about was one of the big things has been linebacker coverage, right? That was a real Achilles heel of the team, or having the zone blitzes where the end would get caught on the wheel. Those types of things that have been kind of a killer at times for Georgia Tech. Getting out of those situations with your scheme. So being more downhill up front and being more aggressive in the, secondary, letting those guys play with their eyes forward more instead of, always being concerned about something busting behind them, which seemed to be the bugaboo for the secondary, really, with different players for the last few years. I think that there was just a lack of confidence at times from those guys, and they're on an island and they're peeking back too much in the backfield or giving up a step or bad leverage or whatever it is. I think they're trying to get away from that, and that's where Gideon can kind of help them. And he's an aggressive dude. He's a very different personality. Tyler was an intense guy, but Blake's on another level, man. Like he doesn't let a lot of people in. Like he's um, very intense at what he does. And I know some people that know him away from football, and they said that yeah, he kind of plays it close to the vest. Like he's an intense guy, and it's a little different than Tyler was. Tyler was intense too, but a little more friendly. And Blake's like he made this move to make his next step as his progress probably towards becoming a head coach. Like he is taking this dead ass serious. Like this is what I'm doing. And so the vibe's cool. The players really seem to respond to him. Like
Hmm.
so Santucci's a bit of yeller. I, he would he would get after some dudes. Gideon's like more of like a searing intensity kind of guy. Like he'll yell a little bit, but he like gets up and gets in somebody's face and is a little more. It's a just different type of coaching.
Hmm.
He's not trying to show them up, but I think it's effective because when he does it, it's kind of startling almost. Yeah, I've been impressed with him so far. Obviously, everything changes when you got the 5 seconds to make a call or whatever that math is. I forget what it is, 3.5 seconds or whatever that number is to make a call, especially if you're playing a tempo team.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It's so different when you have the headset on and it's on you, man, to do it. He's got to learn quick because obviously open to Colorado and you got Clemson in week 3. Um, there's no time to be wasted.
Hmm. Weird little detail here. Has he said anything about if he'll be on the sidelines or in the booth?
I assume he'll be in the booth.
Okay.
Um, it's almost impossible, I think, in this day and age, unless you're really experienced calling plays, to be on the field.
So like Brent
And
Venables
as
or
a
something like
safety, a
that.
guy that does the safeties. Yeah, and as a guy who's a safeties coach, I feel like he was probably in the booth at Texas, but I haven't looked. That's a good question.
Hmm.
It's funny. I don't think we asked them about something. I'm glad you mentioned that. That is something I will ask Brent Key when we talk to him this weekend.
It's
What
one of
are
the
they
yeah
doing with the staff?
one of those things that
Um,
I don't know how much difference it makes,
Santucci
but
was in the box.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, Santucci and Buster were in the box last year. Um, I think it helps, like, because you can, especially if you're a guy like he's, especially as secondary, he's gonna be looking at the bigger picture. It's really hard to look at that field level in a game and be
Hmm.
able to maybe figure out what you're doing wrong as easily and having to rely on someone relaying info to you. Whereas he will have, I will go on a limb and say the safeties will probably have the green dot on their helmets too. So he'll be
Hmm.
able to be talking to a safety, making whatever last minute adjustments as he sees how the other team lines up or whatever personnel are on the field. So, and so much of that defense is predicated on that. I think he's going to want to be in the box. I'd be shocked beyond shocked if he was not in the box.
I think that's one of the things that if all the football you ever watch is on TV, I don't think you really understand how different the perspective is standing on the sidelines. And I mean, in retrospect, that's one of the things that always blew me away about Paul Johnson was things that he could see and could like recognize that were happening with that vantage point standing on the sidelines. It's like, how can you see this or how can you tell? It's
And
pretty wild to me.
his play calling sheet was this. He'd
Yeah.
have like a post-it note with like it was like a Denny's napkin with like 3 things scribbled on it. Hey, this is what we're gonna do. And like half the time he did that during the game, he'd be like, all right, we can do this counter, this or whatever, this one minute blocking adjustment, and then suddenly they're breaking off big runs. Like, yeah, that was he drew a play in the dirt. Like that's a famous Paul Johnson story. Like literally walked over to the sideline. I think it was 09 or 08 and like drew in the dirt something like to show them something they wanted them to do. Didn't even use the dry erase board. Like I mean, he was built different. It's very funny because when they hired Jeff and he was on the Waffle House culture, I was like, I had kept trying to get Paul Johnson. I wanted him to clip like a Waffle House menu on his lapel, like as his play call sheet,
Yeah.
just to like irritate people. And I thought
Yeah.
it'd be funny because the Waffle House guys were tech people and
Hmm.
help the program out. And I was like, I imagined this would be like the funniest, like kind of subversive marketing thing you could do of all time. And he wouldn't do it, but I thought it was funny because he would talk every single game was, he doesn't have a play sheet and they don't
Yeah.
script their plays. And
Every
you'd hear about
television
that for like
broadcast
10 minutes
for 11 years or whatever it
for,
was. Yep.
whatever, 10, 11 years, whatever long Paul was there, you'd hear about. I was like, all right, yeah, we get it.
Yep.
He likes to. I was like, this is how he does it. Like some guys are savants. He was a savant of his offense. He knew what he's doing. I'm sure there's a DC equivalent. That's harder though because you're calling. That's so much harder to do that as a DC because you're reacting to so much stuff in real time.
Yep. Yep. Talking more about Gideon and that defense, Kelly, we talked about last year Santucci, and that defense was probably one of the better ones that we've seen from Georgia Tech in the last 10, 15 years even. Um, they finished 78th nationally in SP Plus. They are projected this year 60th, even further improvement. Is there, I guess in your mind, is it really just about trying to maintain the level that they were at last year, or is there reason to believe that they might take an additional step forward here this year between obviously somewhat new scheme, new coaching staff, but also new bodies that are in the building versus the guys who left?
My expectation would be both offensively and defensively, they take a big step forward.
Hmm.
I think special teams should be better. They have a better punter now. Can really kill it. That's a game changer for your defense. It was such a roll of the dice, and I really like David Shanahan, but it was a roll of the dice with him every time what you would get. He'd outkick his coverage one punt and then punt it 32 yards in the next punt when you
Mm-hmm.
needed him to boom it deep. Um, Marshall Nichols can consistently punt it very deep. The UNLV transfer they picked up, one of the other big portal guys. Uh, I think defensively they'll benefit from things like that if the offense is a little more efficient. Obviously the passing game kind of struggled a little bit last year. They were not with between Haynes' shoulder and some early season drops and struggles. Singleton had a big drop I think it was the Florida State game, the first game of the season in Ireland. I feel like he dropped a deep shot in the end zone or underran it a little bit early in that game, if I remember correctly. They had a lot of that. That was a big staple of offense the first year with Buster. It was less vertical shots last year. Obviously, we found out why as the season went along. Um, all of those things should help the efficiency of both sides of the football, and I think that's where you'll start to see the big improvements. And those are the margins that turn you into a 9-10 win team versus winning 7 games or 6 games in the regular season, which is what they've been doing. Hitting that next notch up is the big thing now for Brent. Like, you got to get to. I think you got to win 9 games. Like with the schedule you have,
Mm-hmm.
take care of your business, win 9 games, and if you get there, I think you're in the hunt at least for the ACC.
Let's talk about that schedule here, because that was the other thing. I mentioned earlier looking at depth in the quarterback room and a lot of returning production as reasons that I had confidence coming into 2025. But man, not the least of which of those reasons is the schedule, and some of it who is on there, but a lot of which is who's not on there. They don't get a Notre Dame. They don't get some other juggernaut within the ACC. They start at Colorado, which is an interesting kind of matchup. I think a good, somewhat bellwether game, maybe like, show us what you got here. That's a decent opponent out the gate. Gardner Webb, Clemson, obviously the big one, week 3 at home. Temple at Wake Forest, Virginia Tech at Duke, Syracuse at NC State, at Boston College, Pittsburgh, and then obviously the Georgia game, that one this year in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But I mean, there's 2 games here where you're clearly going to be an underdog. I think you get them both at home. That's Clemson and Georgia. And then the other 10, I don't think it's a crazy thing to think that you could be favored in the other 10 games. I think there's plenty of potential for some toss-ups here and there, where you kind of get, some coin flippy luck kind of games. But it feels like, Kelly, the schedule's here that if you are going to put together a run and win, and have a 9 or 10 win kind of season, this is the kind of schedule you'd look to make that a possibility.
Yeah, I think they got a chance to have a special season. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Someone that covers Georgia Tech for a long time, I'm still expecting the weird clunker game, whatever that is. Last year was at Syracuse, where they just didn't play well for most of the game. 2 years ago, obviously the Bowling Green game was sort of that, or Boston College. They've had one of those. Getting out of that will be the biggest difference in what makes them a true competitor to the ACC versus being a team that's sort of so-so.
Yep. We looked before at their win total. It was listed at 7.5. My thought there was that that's actually a really good number on kind of defining what is a successful versus unsuccessful season. I mean, I think if you want to have a successful season, it's got to go over that number. If it's going to go under that number, probably not a successful campaign for Georgia Tech. Curious to know, Kelly, I mean, would you agree with that a successful season here, kind of the delimiter is winning at least 8 games, considering all that you've got coming back and the schedule and everything else?
I kind of lost you there for a second, but
oh yeah, sorry,
over under
yeah,
7.5 wins. I'd taken the over all day, and I'm going. My prediction is the low end's 8 and the high end's 11, and it's going to fall somewhere in between there probably. I think it's going to be a 9 to 10 win season for Georgia Tech. I think they're pretty loaded up, and I think they'll upset Clemson or Georgia, and they'll lose a game they're not supposed to lose, and that's sort of where I've been on this all along.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would be clearly one of the best seasons in the modern time for Georgia Tech. So that would be a huge success. Don't know. It does seem like you're having kind of some technical difficulties on there. Do you have time for one more quick one, or wrap it up here? You got me, Kelly?
Yeah, I got you now. You kind of cut it down for a second.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, maybe we'll just go ahead and wrap up here. I was going to ask you about the AD change, but we can talk about that a different time. Yeah, I mean, to your point, I mean, I think if they win at least 8, I would think that's successful. Certainly going 9, 10, even at the high end 11, as you said. I mean, that feels like a really successful campaign for Georgia Tech in 2025 or any year, obviously, at this point, given what the program has been in recent years. So, Kelly,
Absolutely.
This has been – sorry?
I said absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, this has been awesome. Really, really appreciate your time here, as always. Do you want to tell the people real quick where they can go find your stuff?
Yeah, JacketsOnline on the on3rivals.com network now. It's both. We are always running some sort of special deal. I think right now you can go check my Twitter, but there's a deal where you can get a deal on getting a subscription to Athletic. So along with get a year of Athletic along with subscription to JOL. So check it out. Appreciate all the Georgia Tech fans that have subscribed. Sorry, it's been a long day. We're recording this a little bit late, and yeah, I'm as excited as I've been in a long time to cover this team. I think probably since 2014. I think this has the makings of being a potential special year. I hope for the sake of my friends and the people who read the stuff that they have it. They certainly have been through so much with the Jeff Collins era and how things kind of petered out at the end with Paul. That they need to have a good year like this to just get the fan base back engaged and get to the next steps that Brent Key has in mind.
Yep. I would completely agree. And I mean, it does feel like a good time to be a Georgia Tech fan. I mean, you're seeing some things from the school administration and from the athletic department and such that it feels like there is commitment and alignment and all those buzzwords there in a way that there hasn't been for a number of years, that has kind of led to some stagnation and such, that it feels like, they're kind of starting to break out at a pretty opportune time to be doing so. So that is an encouraging sign. And obviously, as always, we tell you guys every time that Kelly's on here, I mean, this is for my money, literally for my money. This is the best Georgia Tech information, on the internet. I've been a subscriber for over a decade now. Highly recommended. I tell people, if you're a Georgia Tech fan, you care about football enough to be listening to this podcast over an hour later, you would be well worth your money to be a member at JacketsOnline.com. So highly recommended. Kelly, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. We would love to have you back on sometime soon.
Yeah, happy to come on anytime. Appreciate it. Thanks, Joey.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to get out of here. We got a few more teams we're going to preview, so keep it tuned here as we get you ready for the 2025 season. YouTube.com/@the-ACC football podcast, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast content, we are there. Please hit the subscribe button. We would really, really appreciate that. But for that guy, Mr. Kelly Quinlan, I'm Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, go Jackets and go ACC.